creative people, it's Sherry with Dragon Wagon Studio. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel today. In this video, I'm going to be showing you different ways that you can protect your photos before putting them in resin. My last video I did, we just dumped resin on a photo. I had the proper materials, and I wasn't worried about any kind of bleeds or anything going wrong in that video. But what if I didn't have the right materials? So this video today will test out a bunch of different mediums, see which one works out the best, and see what kind of finishes we get with those. I'll be testing out two different types of photo paper, one from Kodak and one from Canon, and we'll be testing out a bunch of different mediums. It's going to be a great informational video. So with that, let's get started. All right, guys. These are little circles I cut out for our test today. They are of my two little bunnies. They're all squished in a little house. I thought it was adorable. So we're going to do these. I'm just going to make little medallions just to test out all of our mediums. So this is a high gloss paper from Canon, which is this one right here. And then I'm going to be testing out a soft gloss from Kodak. And that's these guys here. They're not as shiny. They got a little bit of a soft luster, and that's about it. So we'll test out those two brands. And then I am going to test out clear PVA glue, a clear glaze medium by Josana. We are going to do a clear gesso. Of course, the famous Mod Podge. I'm going to try out a polyurethane, an acrylic varnish, and then a varathane. Some of these, I don't think this will work. I think it'll make the colors bleed, but I have them, so we're just going to test them. Why not? All right, so first things first. You got your photo. You're going to cut out your shape for whatever size mold. Since this is a test sample, we're just going to do little circles. I really discourage you guys cutting your photos out with scissors. Please don't do that. It makes it look awful. If you want to do circles, you can get a little tool like this. It's very inexpensive, and it's just like a compass, but it's a cutting tool. So it will cut out a perfect circle for you, and it's super easy to use if you don't have a cutting machine. So just a little tip for you guys. Also, if you're going to do straight edges, use a paper cutter. You can get them at the dollar store. They're really cheap. Using scissors just makes your edges look so unclean and awful. Just a little tip for you guys. Do what you want, but there are better ways to make it look nice. All right, so all I'm going to do here is just going to go through each one of these mediums, and we're going to coat both front and back of the photos to protect it before we put it in resin. All right, so why do we coat our photos? Well, inks will bleed, especially if you have a pigmented ink or an inkjet printer. Those are notorious for bleeds. And if you don't know the difference between dye and pigmented inks, you can Google it. I know the printer I use is a Canon G600 series, and it is a dye ink. So you can get away with not protecting your photo with a dye ink, but always do a test sample before you ruin a big, beautiful picture, of course. So this is what the purpose of this video is. Also, you can get wrinkling, warping, cloudiness, yellowing, so protecting your picture before putting in resin is very, very important. Desealing it will also keep your pictures nice and crisp for many, 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 many years. Well, actually, forever. Tools to use, nice soft brush. You want something that's super nice and soft. The harder your bristles are, the more streaks you're going to get. And especially with Mod Podge, Mod Podge is notorious for streaks. So you want to use something like a foam brush that's nice and soft, or a nice soft bristles. So with that being said, I am just going to start coating some of these. And we're going to do both front and back, and we're going to do multiple coats. So we're going to do 2 to at least 3 coats. And I'm gonna go through and label these so we know which ones are which. I'll need a pen. All right. So let's start with some PVA glue. I'm gonna do the front first and then we'll let that dry and then do the back. Maybe a little more, got a little thin there. Bubbles, we don't want those. We don't want bubbles. So once you do your first coat, make sure your next coat is the back. You want to do it in uniform, you know, or you're going to just get some warping right off the bat. That guy there. We'll do one of these guys. Same. Just like so. Yeah, this paper doesn't like that. See, we're getting some warping. So on the other side, we're going to do the back and I'll even that out. And this one was PVA. Yeah, I don't like how that's happening. This is why we do tests. All right, next. That goes on real nice. That goes on real nice. Get a little thick on that guy. So the Kodak paper is definitely thinner. Most definitely. Getting some bubbles in there. Next one we'll do gesso. That will dry clear. It is clear. Don't worry. All right, Mod Podge. There's that lovely smell. I really do not like the smell of this stuff. Really don't. All right, so now we're getting into some chemicals here, so I'm going to throw on a mask real quick. All right. Also, another thing, when you guys are picking out aerosols or other mediums, make sure it says, what does it say on that one? Non-yellowing. Because stuff like white glue or glue sticks or stuff like that, they will yellow on you. So make sure you got non-yellowing. This says non-yellowing. It will just save you disappointment later. That was Mod Podge. This one's Resin. What the hell did I do here? Oops. Is that glue? Oops, it was glue. See, I'm getting some dye running on this one right there, I can tell. I knew the Resin would do that. But I don't see it happening on that one. So, interesting. That's why I wanted to test out 2 different types of paper. Well, I wanted to test out more, but I only had 2 different types of paper. Let's write that down before I forget. This is Mod Podge. Mod Podge. And this is Resin. So next one I'm going to do the polyurethane, but I'm just going to take it off and spray it. I won't spray it on this because it's going to contaminate the other ones. So I'll take this little dude, and I'll do the polyurethane, and I'll do the same with the acrylic varnish. Alright, that's that guy. And that guy. That's polyurethane. This is acrylic. And polyurethane is also an oil base, so it takes a long time to dry. Now we got one left, and that is for laminating. You can get self-laminating sheets at the dollar store. Obviously super cheap, so if you don't have a laminator, these are available. And this also works like a charm. And all you need to do with these, there's no machine involved at all. It's got a sticky side underneath this paper, and then you just stick your paper on there, fold this over, and it seals it. So I'll just stick these guys in the little corner. So I don't want to use the whole sheet, and I can save it for another time. You want to leave some space. Alright. I got these terribly cut out. Very terribly. So, I just use scissors. We're just doing this as a demo. But when you're doing the laminating, you need to keep a little bit of an edge on it, or it's just going to split back open. So, contact on both sides is imperative because that's how it seals. So you're going to have to leave at least a millimeter edge just to protect the photo. And that's all you have to do for that one. All right, so I'm going to be back when all these are coated on both sides and dry. And then we'll go and put some resin on them, and then we'll see how they turn out. All right, creative people. So I have put 3 coats of our mediums on each one of these, front and back. And we'll just go through these briefly because we have different effects and we've had some different things happen. So PVA glue. We definitely have some texture built up on there with the PVA. It did seem to pull up some of the pigment on the Canon paper, but not so much on the Kodak paper. So that was interesting because remember the Kodak paper was a little bit thinner. So we did have some interesting different results, and that's why I wanted to use different types of paper too, just to give you guys an idea that it can make a difference. And now with the glaze, that one turned out beautiful. Except for on the Kodak paper, we did see right here, we did get some pigment lift off. But it didn't seem to affect the picture at all. We did have a little bit of warping more on the Kodak paper than we did on the Canon, just because it was thinner. But any of the warping that we did have did level out because we did the back as well. So front, back, and I'll alleviate your warping issues. Gesso was terrible. It picked up a lot of that pigment on the Canon paper. We got some damage to the picture. Gesso is also a matte, so you're not going to have a gloss at all on using gesso. It's designed to seal canvases and give some texture to canvases for paint to stick, but it is also a primer and a sealer, so I figured we'll throw it in with the others and see what happens, just out of curiosity. So I don't really recommend that. It didn't do too much damage on the the Kodak paper, which is this one. And it just basically took out that soft gloss that was on there to make it a matte photo. So that wasn't too bad, but we still are seeing some streaks from the brush, even though I use a soft brush. And there is texture to this. Like, it does feel like a very, very light sandpaper, like a 6000 grit type thing. So and then we had the Mod Podge, and Mod Podge did pretty good. It is streaky and it is notorious for that. I mentioned that earlier, so there are some streaks on there. But, you know, once we put resin on, that might take that out of there. It kept the picture undamaged. All the ink stayed in place. It didn't harm it at all. Any kind of little globs or streaks you're definitely going to see with Mod Podge. But we'll see what the resin does. Next we had the Varathane, and that did exactly what I thought it would and damage the photo. Just because it is a heavy solvent, there is a lot more chemicals in Varathane. It's designed to penetrate wood, so of course it would penetrate through the pigment into the paper. We got a little more streaking happen on the Kodak paper, not so much on the Canon, but I don't know if I had some glue spread over or what, but we did have some damage to the picture on this top edge there. So I'm not sure if I overbrushed over and got some glue on there or what happened, because it doesn't seem to have it anywhere else in the picture. Other than that, it wasn't bad. It really wasn't that bad on the Canon paper. The polyurethane spray. That one worked out pretty well. I think I got a little close spraying it on one part of this because we did get a little bit of texture in there. So it worked out pretty good. And I think like with the Canon paper on this one here, you barely see any streaks or globs. There's a couple little ones where it got a little heavy there, but that might come out with the resin pour. So, you know, that one might be a pretty good one to use. We'll see the final results. But as far as damaging the picture, it was very, very minimal. And then the acrylic spray was the same thing. I got a little globby on the edge there. Come on, little guy. There we go. And this one, and I didn't add any extra gloss on the soft gloss. So that was kind of interesting. I thought this would actually gloss it up a lot more. So it seemed to bring out a lot more color and brighten up the picture on the Canon paper, but on the Kodak, it kept the pigments the same. and it did not add any gloss. So that was very interesting. And then of course we had the laminated paper, and I believe I forgot to mention, if you can't find the self-laminating sheets or you don't have a laminator, in a pinch you can use packing tape. Just make sure you smooth out your bubbles with a debit card or something like that. So now with that being said, I got some resin chilling in my vacuum chamber. So I'm going to switch out my wax paper under these pictures, and then we'll dump some resin. All right. I got a new sheet of wax paper underneath these. I did label them on the back, and they are still in the same order as they were before. So now I got some resin here. I purposely let it sit for a while and let it thicken up, just because I'm not pouring in a mold. So typically you'd be pouring in whatever mold you want to use and filling that up halfway, put your picture in, and then cover in resin. But since I'm just making medallions and it's just a test, I'm just going to dump resin right on top, and I'm just going to let it cure as is. We just want to see what the results are going to be with using these mediums, the whole purpose of this video. My vacuum chamber didn't do a great job getting all these bubbles out. Maybe I need to invest in a new one. That's pretty sad. Anyway, so I'm just going to drop a little bit in the middle. It's going to self-level out. It's definitely hot. It's in curing mode right now. You want to use a casting resin is the best type, but in a pinch you can use crafting resin, and that is what I'm using right now just for this because I'm not using a mold. Casting resin is a little bit thinner because you are embedding things in the resin, so it's designed to be a little bit thinner to alleviate the bubble issue. And then I will take my heat gun and get the bubbles out very lightly because heat can damage pictures. So you don't want to be using a torch. I know we're all a little torch happy, but time and place, guys, time and place. All right. You know, I just thought these would be really cute little cell phone button clip stand things, whatever they're called. All right, let's give it some heat. Just gonna go low and slow. And some of it will pour over, but that's okay. This is just a test. All right, so let's let that cure, and then we'll come back and critique these some more. All right, creative people, we are back. Resin's all dry, so let's see what our results are. Before we do that, I'm going to ask you so kindly to hit that subscribe button for me. Just trying to get my content out there as a small channel, and I appreciate every single one of you that does that. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. I really appreciate every single one of you awesome people. All right, so let's get into... This was PVA, and as we know, the top part of this section is Canon paper and the bottom is Kodak paper. I did not change the layout. So we did have some damage from the PVA glue, and the resin did not hide that. Actually, it accentuated it, so it's actually a lot more visible than it was before. So be careful if you're going to be using PVA glue. I don't recommend it because it did damage our photos. Next one, we have The Glaze by Josanna. And this one was actually quite nice to put on. We didn't have too much going on. We did have a little bit of pigmentation that lifted off on the Canon paper, but it did not do that with the Kodak. So interesting results with the papers. That one is a good one to use if you have a clear glaze. Again, guys, make sure you do a test sample before you go and wreck a beautiful picture. This one was gesso, and this one was a matte finish, and it did keep it kind of matte looking even with the resin on top. And we did have some damage to the photo from that, and it also created a texture on the photo, so just be aware. I knew this wouldn't be a good option to use, but we're just testing out different things. Next one, we had the Mod Podge, and this one was very, very popular. A lot of people like to use Mod Podge. Mod Podge is notoriously streaky, but the resin seemed to rectify that. I'm not seeing any streaks in any of these. The pictures came out nice and clear and the color stayed nice and bright. So that one is a good viable one. I like it better on the Canon paper than I do the Kodak. The colors seem to be a lot more vibrant, especially in that blue, than on the Kodak paper. Next we had Resin, and I knew this one would pick up the pigment in the paper because it is a solvent and it's a heavy-duty chemical. It's to protect wood from the elements. We did have some pigmentation that lifted up and it did damage the photo, so not a good idea to use that one. But the color still stayed pretty vibrant. We got some pretty vibrant colors in that blue there. But again, it did damage the photo, so moving on. This one was the polyurethane spray. And this one I did not mind. The only thing with polyurethane, it is oil-based, so it does take longer to dry. So if you do have it on hand, even if you have it in the brush version over the spray, I did like the colors that came out on the Kodak paper. The blue is nice and vibrant. The bunnies are nice and clear. We did get a little bit of yellowing though. I see with my one bunny, Luna, got a yellowish tinge in her fur. She is not. She is white in those areas, so be aware of that. Now, getting away from the oil sprays and into the acrylic sprays. With these guys, I like this one. The acrylic spray worked really well, especially on the Canon paper. My bunnies are nice and vibrant. The colors are nice and vibrant. The resin poured on there beautifully. We had no issues. That was a really good alternative. But on the Kodak, we did see some streaking in there. It did, well, not streaking because it's a spray, but I did have some pigmentation get damaged in that black. But with the Canon paper, it worked out beautifully. Not so much on the Kodak paper. So interesting results with those. And then we had the laminated. Now, before I poured this resin, I knew I did not have it totally sealed, but I didn't tell you guys that earlier. So that did seal. So make sure you do have that lip to make sure your picture is sealed in before you pour resin. Since I did not encase it all in resin, I didn't get any resin on the picture, but if this was in a mold, all the resin would pour in there and possibly damage your photo. So I purposely kept that just to show you guys. But this one did stay sealed and it sealed in beautifully. The picture is as is, and the resin just gave that a little bit of extra shine and a little bit of depth on there. So that one also a really good option. And there you have it, guys. Next video, I'm going to pull away from resin a little bit and get into some acrylic pouring. So I'm going to be showing you guys how to do some different acrylic pours on canvas, such as Dutch, flip cup, stuff like that. So the next few videos will be on acrylic pours. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you hit that notification button so you know when my videos are out and don't miss out on being the first to view them. Stay creative, guys, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.